Okay, so please excuse any horrible pronunciations. I have done this with many different read-alouds with other people reading them, and I do not know all of the words perfectly. But so, chapter 1 of Night by Elie Wiesel. Okay, here we go. They called him Moiche the Beadle, as if his entire life he had never had a surname. He was the jack of all trades in a Hasidic house of prayer, a shtippel. The Jews of Saget, the little town in Transylvania where I spent my childhood, were fond of him. He was poor and lived in utter penury. As a rule, our townspeople, while they did help the needy, did not particularly like them. Moiche the Beadle was the exception. He stayed out of the people's way. His presence bothered no one. He had mastered the art of rendering himself insignificant, invisible. Physically, he was as awkward as a clown. His waif-like shyness made people smile. As for me, I liked his wide, dreamy eyes gazing off into the distance. He spoke little. He sang, or rather he chanted, and the few snatches I caught here and there spoke of divine suffering, like the Shekinah in exile, where, according to Kabbalah, it awaits its redemption linked to that of man. I met him in 1941. I was almost 13 and deeply observant. Of course, they're talking about observing the Jewish faith. By day, I studied Talmud, and by night, I would run to the synagogue to weep over the destruction of the temple. Page 4. One day I asked my father to find me a master who could guide me in the studies of Kabbalah. "You are too young for that. Maimonides tells us that one must be 30 before venturing into the world of mysticism, a world fraught with peril. First, you must study the basic subjects, those you are able to comprehend." My father was a cultured man, rather unsentimental. He rarely displayed his feelings, not even within his family, and was more involved with the welfare of others than with his own kin. The Jewish community of Saget held him in the highest esteem. His advice on public and even private matters was frequently sought. There were 4 of us children, Hilda, the eldest, then Bea, I was the third and the only son. Zipporah was the youngest. My parents ran a store. Hilda and Bea helped with the work. As for me, my place was in the house of study, or so they said. "There are no Kabbalists in Saget," my father would often tell me. He wanted to drive the idea of studying Kabbalah from my mind. In vain. I succeeded on my own in finding a master for myself in the person of Moiche the Beadle. He had watched me one day as I prayed at dusk. "Why do you cry when you pray?" he asked, as though he knew me well. "I don't know," I answered, troubled. I had never asked myself that question. I cried because something inside me felt the need to cry. That was all I knew. "Why do you pray?" he ventured after a moment. Why did I pray? Strange question. Why did I live? Why did I breathe? "I don't know," I told him, even more troubled and ill at ease. "I don't know." From that day on, I saw him often. He explained to me with great emphasis that every question possessed a power that was lost in the answer. Man comes closer to God through the questions he asks him, he liked to say. Therein lies true dialogue. Man asks and God replies, but we don't understand his replies. We cannot understand them because they dwell in the depths of our souls and remain there until we die. The real answers, Eliezer, you will find only within yourself. "And why do you pray, Moiche?" I asked him. "I pray to God within me for the strength to ask him the real questions." We spoke that way almost every evening, remaining in the synagogue long after the faithful had all gone. Sitting in the semi-darkness, where only a few half-burnt candles provided a flickering light. One evening I told him how unhappy I was not to be able to find in Saget a master to teach me the Zohar, the Kabbalistic works, the secrets of Jewish mysticism. He smiled indulgently. After a long silence, he said, "There are 1,001 gates allowing entry into the orchard of mystical truth. Every human being has his own gate. He must not err and wish to enter the orchard through the gate other than his own. That would present a danger not only for the one entering, but also for those who are already inside." And Moiche the Beadle, the poorest of the poor of Saget, spoke to me for hours on end about the Kabbalah's revelation and its mysteries. Thus began my initiation. Together we would read over and over again the same page of the Zohar, not to learn it by heart, but to discover within the very essence of divinity. And in the course of those evenings, I became convinced that Moiche the Beadle would help me enter eternity into that time when question and answer would become one. We're turning the page for page 6. And then one day all foreign Jews were expelled from Saget, and Moiche the Beadle was a foreigner. Crammed into cattle cars by the Hungarian police, they cried silently. Standing on the station platform, we too were crying. The train disappeared over the horizon. All that was left was thick, dirty smoke. Behind me, someone said, sighing, "What do you expect? That's war." The deportees were quickly forgotten. A few days after they left, it was rumored that they were in Galicia, working, and even that they were content with their fate. Days went by, then weeks and months. Life was normal again. A calm, reassuring wind blew through our homes. The shopkeepers were doing good business. The students lived among their books, and the children played in the streets. One day, I was about to enter the synagogue. I saw Moiche the Beadle sitting on a bench near the entrance. He told me what had happened to him and his companions. The train with the deportees had crossed the Hungarian border and once in Polish territory had been taken over by the Gestapo. The train had stopped. The Jews were ordered to get off and onto waiting trucks. The trucks were headed toward a forest. There, everybody was ordered to get out. They were forced to dig huge trenches. When they had finished their work, the men from the Gestapo began theirs. Without passion or haste, they shot their prisoners, who were forced to approach the trench one by one and offer their necks. Infants were tossed into the air and used as targets for machine guns. This took place in the Galician forest near Colomé. How had he, Moiche the Beadle, been able to escape? By a miracle. He was wounded in the leg and left for dead. Page 7. Day after day, night after night, he went from one Jewish house to the next telling his story, and that of Melka, the young girl who lay dying for 3 days, and that of Toby, the tailor who begged to die before his sons were killed. Moiche was not the same. The joy in his eyes was gone. He no longer sang. He no longer mentioned either God or Kabbalah. He spoke only of what he had seen. But people not only refused to believe his tales, they refused to listen. Some even insinuated that he had only wanted their pity, that he was imagining things. Others flatly said that he had gone mad. As for Moiche, he wept and pleaded. "Jews, listen to me. That's all I ask of you. No money, no pity, just listen to me." He kept shouting in synagogue between the prayer at dusk and the evening prayer. Even I did not believe him. I often sat with him after services and listened to his tales, trying to understand his grief, but all I felt was pity. "They think I'm mad," he whispered. The tears, like drops of wax, flowed from his eyes. Once I asked him the question, "Why do you want people to believe you so much? In your place, I would not care whether they believed me or not." He closed his eyes as to escape time. "You don't understand," he said in despair. "You cannot understand. I was saved miraculously. I succeeded in coming back. Where did I get my strength? I wanted to return to Saget to describe to you my death, so that you might ready yourselves while there is still time. Life. I no longer care to live. I am alone. But I wanted to come back to warn you. Only no one is listening to me." This was toward the end of 1942. Thereafter, life seemed normal once again. London radio, which we listened to every evening, announced encouraging news. The daily bombings of Germany and Stalingrad, the preparation of the Second Front. And so we, the Jews of Saget, waited for better days that surely were to come. I continued to devote myself to my studies. Talmud during the day and Kabbalah at night. My father took care of business in the community. My grandfather came to spend Rosh Hashanah with us, so as to attend the services of the celebrated Bibi of Borshe. My mother was beginning to think it was high time to find an appropriate match for Hilda. Thus passed the year 1943.